Welcome to Inspiring Women with Laurie McGraw. I am your host, Laurie McGraw. I have spent the past 30 years in leadership, and over the years, I've come to learn one thing. Women need women, and not just any women, but inspiring women. Tune in every week to hear from women at the pinnacle of their careers and from others who are just starting out. Episodes can be found at inspiringwomen.show or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening, and I hope you will be inspired. This is Laurie McGraw, and we are speaking today on Inspiring Women with Afsaneh Naimollah. Now, Afsaneh has been in Silicon Valley. She's a Silicon Valley-based global technology and healthcare executive. She's got over 30 years of corporate experience in both investment banking, advising, innovation. She today is the managing partner of XEM Partners, which is a corporate advisory and investment banking firm. She also is the executive in residence for Plug and Play Tech Center, which is the largest innovation advisory firm working with accelerators for early stage VC and startups. She has, in her 30 years, she's executed over 150 M&A transactions in 20 countries. She's raised over $12 billion of capital in all the companies that she's worked with. And she's also the author of HIT Greatest Hits, which is a widely read and respected newsletter that she puts out monthly. The latest one, which was quite excellent, Afsaneh, was How Robots Can Create a World of Abundance in Healthcare. And Afsaneh, I am delighted to be speaking with you today.
Thank you.
Well, let's get started on Inspiring Women. So, Afsaneh, I always start the podcast sort of talking about you've got so much experience. You've worked with so many companies across the healthcare space. Why don't you just tell us what you're doing right now? What does your day-to-day look like with the different responsibilities you have?
So I call myself recovering investment banker. I'm not a full-time investment banker. I have a portfolio of careers today. Obviously, I still do my investment banking. I have a stable of large private equity firms, as well as some large healthcare companies that when they're evaluating acquisitions or partnerships, I work with them, I advise them. And, I bring them lots of ideas from the early stage companies. I kind of see myself as what I call a knowledge transfer engine, bringing the world of startups to larger companies that have matured in their growth trajectory. And then I bring, obviously, the view and the discipline of the larger companies to the startups. So that's kind of one thing I do. As you said, I'm a publisher of HIT Greatest Hits. That's kind of my intellectual outlet. I try to present really the Silicon Valley view to the rest of the world. My readers, I have readers globally as well as in the US. So that's the second thing I do. And as I said, I work with startups, I mentor startups, I'm an angel investor myself. At any given time, I have about 3 or 4 companies that I take under my wing. And I try not to get involved in their fundraise because I don't want them to want me for the fundraising. I really want them to want me for go-to-market strategy, really showing them what's a viable business model, what's not, and then have them organically raise money because of how I shaped their story. I'm really a storyteller. Investment banking is all about telling the story of a company. And the last thing I do is I sit on private and public boards. I try to engage with organizations that I can, bring my assets to the table. I don't want that to be, we're looking for a female board member, so please join us so we can meet our quota. I try to stay away from those situations. So I have a portfolio of careers. years.
I would also say you're probably one of the more well-connected people across the healthcare space. And I want to talk a little bit about that. So beyond being a recovering investment banker, I would describe you perhaps as chronically curious. I mean, that's how we first met on a HIM showroom floor of 30,000 people and just struck up a fantastic conversation. It was just so impressive that after so many years, for you to be so deeply curious about what I was particularly working on that day. So let's just talk about how you got to this place of being so well connected across healthcare, working with all these different companies at a very senior level. Maybe if you could just give us a little bit of that history, Afsaneh.
Sure. I started on Wall Street in the 80s. I kind of, fell into Wall Street just because I'm an immigrant. I'm from Iran. Those days, it was right after the hostage crisis. Nobody was giving jobs to Iranians, and I was lucky that I got a job offer from a bank that is not part of J.P. Morgan. Used to be called First Chicago. That's how I got into Wall Street by sheer accident. But I, luckily, with an MBA under my belt, it was natural for me. It was like, oh my God, it's my only job, but I'm really good at it. So from early on, I did a lot of very creative financing in the capital markets. And then after a couple of years, I fell into technology, horizontal technology. So, I started covering those days what used to be IBM, Digital Computer, Compaq, the early Microsoft, Google and Facebook were not born at that time. And then there was one dinner. I had a 3-hour dinner with a woman I knew at a very, very large healthcare company. And this was around the High-Tech Act. And she said to me, what are you doing in tech? You should leave tech and join healthcare. And you should really look into this High-Tech Act. And High-Tech Act, for those who do not know what it was when government was literally cutting checks to doctors to embrace electronic medical records. It was the first phase of electronification of healthcare industry. So I went back, and typical Afsaneh, I read. I'm like, oh my God, she's absolutely right. This business is going to explode. This industry is going to explode. So I quickly, shifted my focus to healthcare. And again, typical Afsaneh, I don't go gradually. I went and actually wrote a 70-page white paper on what can happen to healthcare. And that was 2010. And this 70-page paper got huge coverage. CNBC, lots of other people quoted it. And there was like a graph in that white paper that showed the stacks of healthcare technology that High-Tech Act is going to create. And that kind of branded me in healthcare. And a lot of people came and solicited my advice. So I was like, oh, wow, this was amazing. And then I started to, do fundraising, M&A transaction. And, the amazing part of being an investment banker is you work with so many CEOs and boards, some good, some bad, some average, but you begin to see pattern recognition because you're dealing with so many, I've dealt with thousands of healthcare companies by now in 15 years, 20 years of being in the industry. So that's really how I kind of build, the answer to your question, build my network is through just doing deals, talking to a lot of people, and, being in a position to, over time, being an opinion leader of where I think the industry is going to go.
Well, and it goes back to that being very curious and diving in. So that seems to be, your secret power, if you will, in terms of really trying to understand that and talk about being omnipotent, and with the High-Tech Act, because certainly we have seen amazing new companies be born over the last decade plus in healthcare, and it all did start with that particular act. But what about right now? I mean, we saw some of the largest investments in digital health in particular. over the past 2 years, COVID years, $19 billion only to be surpassed by over $20 billion in the last year. Where are we in that bubble? Do you think it's a bubble right now in digital health in particular, or what are you seeing based on current state of investing today?
So one thing to know about healthcare, obviously the largest sector of our economy, $4 trillion, is that it has always been decoupled from economic cycles. Healthcare does not move up and down with the economy because it's not a discretionary part of our economy. That's the first thing to know. The second thing I would like to note here is the private market valuations, for the most part, always have exceeded public market valuation when there is a downturn in the public market. Why? Because the amount of money available in the pockets of private equity firms and venture funds are literally in the trillions globally. That money has to be put to work. And good deals are chased by many, many, many people. So just to put it in perspective, in 2021, there were 3,000 companies that were funded in digital health, and 574 mergers and acquisitions were executed in 2021. That amount is, Q on Q, we are down about maybe 30%. Valuations are down a little bit. So yes, it's catching up. I don't think this has ever been a bubble necessarily, just because our industry is very sick and needs a lot of help and a lot of advancements. Yes, people, companies have gone bankrupt, but if you look at companies that don't make it in healthcare versus other industries like fintech and horizontal software, we actually have a lower rate of failure. So I don't know whether I will ever call it a bubble, but it's certainly a robust investment environment. However, I believe because of what's happening, over $1.5 trillion in the US alone has been lost in wealth. Markets are down 25-30% depending on what indices you look at. So that is going to catch up. And I think there will be some tempering of funding, but I think we're going to have a robust M&A environment.
Okay. I've also seen, just in terms of, my experience working with many, many innovators, investors, funders, as well as entrepreneurs, that just the level of sophistication in terms of what people understand about the markets and how they need to, address certain issues for their companies is become quite a bit more sophisticated. I think that's natural when you have the level of investment and innovation that's going on. What do you see today that is required for young entrepreneurial companies? You work with so many of them to be successful. And how do you, just working with the Plug and Play Tech Center, how do those types of incubators and accelerators help support successful companies?
Right. So I'll answer the second half first. So, people like Plug and Play and organizations like them are really, really good because they are, Plug and Play has 35 offices around the world, 15 different verticals, several hundred corporate members. So corporate members pay a lot of money to Plug and Play to have, exposure to the ecosystem of startups globally. They have like 5 centers in China, for example, alone. They even have a center in Saudi Arabia now. To have a forum whereby you bring corporate members and who will tell Plug and Play, hey, these are my pain points, and then Plug and Play goes and matches what those pain points are to the startup community and bringing these two parties together. I think that's incredibly successful model because it accelerates the growth of the startup. But it can also quickly weed out startups that are not, don't have corporate demand, if you will. So that's the model that I see. As far as what you need to be successful, I think one of the biggest, watching some of the failures in healthcare, I will say a couple of things. The companies that have not been successful or have utterly failed and closed shop is they were going to do too much too fast, and they raised a lot of money and without really understanding what the business model is going to be. And what they were trying to do was really boil the ocean. And that is not going to work in healthcare. You can boil the ocean eventually after Series D and E or going public, but don't boil the ocean. Don't go and raise $75 million Series A and try to boil the ocean and be many things to many people. So that's the first thing. Just, I think, slowly we go far. Try to solve one problem and one problem only. And I think that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is for sure have technical people on your staff. If the founder or CEO is not technical, he or she should better have a co-founder or early employee that is highly technical, because that goes a long way in this very competitive market. And technical could mean different things: better hardware engineer, better AI, ML modeler, better software engineer, architect. And the third thing I would say is don't be too stingy raising money, and don't have much largesse when people are throwing money at you. Don't take it necessarily if you don't need it, because that's always been, a Series A company should not be having, Christmas parties that are, going to cost $30,000, which I've seen in this part of the world. So those are the three things I think: solving a single problem, having technical people on your staff, and raise just enough money to get you over the hump for the first one or two product iteration that you have.
Yeah, pragmatic approach to use of capital is just seems like fantastic advice. Well, this is Inspiring Women. I want to talk about the women and where are all the women? So, for all of this, a great opportunity and financial, so that it's not a bubble, is kind of encouraging to hear. I like the perspective that you gave in terms of, its relationship to economic cycles or not. But the statistics for female founders, for female CEOs, are not great. We have very little of this amazing amount of funding that are going to female founders and CEOs. So why is this? Is there not enough women in the innovation space, or is it that why are the checks not large enough? What are you seeing, and then what do you think should be being done about it?
I think about this a lot, because I felt like I took a lot of arrows on my chest on behalf of women on Wall Street. When I first started my career in a very, very high power, I kind of fell into a very high power division that had, very few women. And I think about this a lot. And I really, what I'm going to say is probably not what you're expecting to hear. I think performance should count the most. I'm not of the school that says, this is a female founder, we got to find a way to fund her, however bad or good the business model is. I do not subscribe to that opinion. However, and I've seen some bad businesses being funded just because the VC wanted to show in the report card that they have backed women. I've seen women get promoted in the VC community and to partner at the age of 27, and they had no business being a partner at the age of 27. So we can overdo this. I think A, performance. B, I think women like me and others like me have to make it a mission in their life to help other women. I think, if I want to mentor a company, all else being equal, I will always go to the female founders rather than not. We need to help them and lift them the right way, not just because of the gender. Now, is there still bias or unbiased discrimination in the Silicon Valley area? Absolutely. This is one of the worst places. This is, I come from New York. I worked in Japan. I worked in UK. I worked in France and Germany. This is one of the worst areas I have seen. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with just being, all engineers. And, to this day, unfortunately, majority of engineers are male. And they're just much more comfortable with each other. And I think that is changing. The progress is going to be extremely slow, but persistence is the name of the game, and performance is the name of the game. Those two P's, be persistent and perform, focus on your performance. We eventually, are gonna break. And it's not so much glass ceiling stuff anymore. Larger companies here are very aware of trying to, make sure that elevate women who deserve to be elevated. It's more having these boys club be comfortable, having females also, pulling up a chair to the table.
What about that, Afsaneh? So let's talk about Silicon Valley. So you're in Silicon Valley. You love Silicon Valley. You're a big proponent for it. So, but it's also, quite frankly, it's known as a big boys club. So what do you see in Silicon Valley? What is the culture there, and what do you like about it? And then how can women, either get into that club or make it on their own? Just what is your perspective there? I think that your focus on performance absolutely makes sense. I mean, nobody should get a free pass, and I would absolutely agree with that. Yet there still are obstacles in the way that are not just performance related in terms of what the numbers are telling us.
Right. I think women looking after women should be the key here. So there are now 100% female-run VCs that are only or trying, not, I don't know whether exclusively, but trying to predominantly fund businesses that are run by women. So women looking after women is really, really important. Let's do the job ourselves rather than, going with our tin can and asking for help from the male counterparts. That's the first thing I want to say. I have been coming to Silicon Valley every couple of months for 25 years. And 6 years ago, I permanently moved here. And I thought I knew everything there was to know about Silicon Valley because I was coming here for over a quarter of a century,
Mm-hmm.
And boy, was I wrong. People here want you to have a zip code of Silicon Valley to bring you under the tent. And even with all this virtual stuff, and yes, we have lost some people, and yes, some companies have gone fully virtual, like Salesforce, I still think Silicon Valley is like Madagascar. It has its own air and its own plantation.
Mm-hmm.
And unless you're here and press flush with people, the doers, the shakers, I just don't think you're going to be taken seriously. That's the way it is. And we will see. We will see whether this virtual environment we have had for the past 2 years is going to change that. I haven't seen it much. It has changed some of it, but so that's the first thing. There's something about the air here. When you're sitting and having coffee on University Avenue in Palo Alto, which I do often, and to my right there is this VC talking about the latest genomic sequencing machine, and to my left is another VC with a startup talking about, lithium batteries. It's just that you cannot replicate that in a Zoom call and in a virtual environment. As far as what women can do is, yes, we keep talking about STEM. Every university has this big push about more women in the STEM program, and that is helping, producing more engineers, female engineers into the system. But I also, feel STEM is not the 100% cure. I think we need well-rounded female leaders in humanities. I love the fact that Facebook hires anthropologists. I love it. And they have very good reasons why they're hiring anthropologists. So not everybody has to be a coder to do well in Silicon Valley.
So being in Silicon Valley makes a difference, and women need to help other women. What do you I mean, with all the entrepreneurs and innovation that is in Silicon Valley and the networks of people that are largely male, what's the responsibility there? And do you see anything changing? Are there efforts being made, within those networks to either bring women along, or do you think it's really on the, women like you who need to make the changes to break in, if you will? Because again, the numbers are just staggering. I mean, 2.3% of the venture funding in the past year going to women. Those numbers are just largely off given all of the value creation that opportunities that are out there.
Yeah, I will stress that women looking after women is the way to go. To be honest, I think there are certain venture funds, which I will not name, that are doing their best to promote women and have done a fabulous job promoting women that deserve to get promoted. And then there are some other ones that are, promoting 27-year-olds to partner. And when you talk to that person, she's clueless about what I'm talking about, because she has been around only for 2 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then she did some big investment that returned 1,000%, and therefore she now deserves to be a partner. So there is definitely awareness, and there are some people that are for sure trying to hire more women. And it's not so much hiring, it's also mentoring, right? It's the mentoring part and having them achieve quality education on the job. And that mentoring part to me is really underestimated. Just because I can hire 10 engineers out of Stanford CS school doesn't mean anything. How much time am I willing to put into these people to really bring them and lift them up, rather than just unleash them into the field and go and learn on your own, which is really what happened to me on Wall Street. I really, with the exception of a couple of years here and there, I really never had a mentor. I'm self-learned, if you will. And I think that mentoring is really important. Is it at a level I like to see? No. Is it better than a couple of years ago? Absolutely.
That is terrific. And I so many of the women, innovators, entrepreneurs, and executives that I speak to, they talk about mentoring in a very serious way. Well, Afsaneh, this is such a great conversation. I'm curious, after 30 years in this industry, in the past 6 or so, sort of like really deeply breathing that Silicon Valley air, what's keeping you motivated and energized about the healthcare tech space that you're in today?
I think that's a great question. I was thinking about it. Yeah, I do like working and mentoring startups. Yes, I do like working with larger healthcare companies and exposing them to the kind of the valley air, if you will. But the most important thing that energizes me is this industry is bottomless pit when it comes to learning. Like, I learn every day. My mind is exercised every day. Right now, I'm I'm getting more and more scientifically focused. Before, for many, many years, I was, working on business models. All remote patient monitoring is pretty much the same technology. What's the best business model and go-to-market strategy that we went? Right now, I'm really steeped into genomics and drug discovery, and how AI and algorithms and modeling can kind of infusing the chemicals of pharma and infusing it with the AI machine learning, and what kind of drugs can we discover. So the scientific part of the industry is really energizing to me.
Well, and lots of people can read more about it in terms of how you bring together those thoughts and those industry perspectives in your monthly HIT Greatest Hits. Afsaneh, this has been a great conversation. As we close out, any last words of advice for other aspiring women who are out there?
I would say, don't mold yourself to meet a given environment requirements at the price of losing yourself. I have seen that a lot, that people keep changing and refining themselves so they can be a better fit inside an organization, or better liked, or better respected. All of that is necessary, but I've also seen women really losing their sense of self with a uppercase S, because they keep molding themselves to fit. And just be yourself, be your authentic self, and focus on learning, and focus on collegiality and collaboration with colleagues without losing the sense of your inner self.
Well, I think that is fantastic advice, and we'll close out on that. This has been an excellent Inspiring Women conversation. I have been speaking with Afsaneh Naimollah, and Afsaneh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been an episode of Inspiring Women with Laurie McGraw. Please subscribe, rate, and review. We are produced by Kate Cruz at Executive Podcast Solutions. More episodes can be found on inspiringwomen.show. I am Laurie McGraw, and thank you for listening.